She hadn't spoken to a man in 11 months. Not a real conversation. Not the kind where someone looks at you and actually listens. There'd been the feed merchant in town who talked at her while counting coins. The circuit preacher who stopped twice a year and delivered the same sermon both times. The neighbor boy who brought wood in January and kept his eyes on his boots the entire time. But not a real conversation. Not since Daniel. Clara Whitfield was 32 years old. She ran 120 acres in the Cimarron Valley of New Mexico Territory in the year 1883, and she had been alone on that land since the morning 11 months ago when she'd found her husband face down in the south pasture with his heart stopped inside him, quiet as a clock with no spring left. She had buried him herself. That was the kind of woman she was. She had dug the grave in the rocky ground behind the oak tree where they used to sit in the evenings, and she had wrapped him in the good quilt, and she had said the things she needed to say, and then she had gone back to the house and started figuring out how to survive. She was still figuring. The cattle were manageable, barely. The garden was producing, the well was good, but the fencing on the north edge had started going, and there was a problem with one of the water channels she couldn't solve alone, and winter was coming, with the particular indifference of seasons that do not care whether you are ready. The last of her hired hands had left in August. Said he had family in Taos. Maybe he did. She was standing at the kitchen window, looking at nothing and thinking about the fence, when she saw the rider come down the valley road. He was moving slow. Not the easy slow of a man in no hurry, but the slow of a man and horse that have both run out of something. The horse was limping slightly, left foreleg, favoring it on the turns. The man was upright in the saddle, but barely, and as he got closer, she could see the dark stain along his left side that meant only one thing. He pulled up at her gate and sat there without moving, calculating whether he had enough left to dismount. Then he looked up and saw her in the window. He took off his hat. That was the thing that stayed with her later, that even then, hurt and exhausted and probably running from something, he took off his hat. She went to the door. She brought the shotgun. She was not a foolish woman, but she held it pointed at the ground, which was a message of its own. He had made it off the horse by the time she reached the porch. Standing at the gate with one hand on the top rail, the other pressed against his side, looking at her with dark eyes that were clear despite everything else. Not the clouded eyes of a man too far gone, focused. He was tall, broad across the shoulders in the way of someone who had done physical work all his life. His jaw needed a razor, his hair needed a barber. But what she noticed, what she kept noticing, was the way he held himself, deliberate, as though he was choosing every small thing, where he stood, how he held his hands, how he met her eyes. There were 2 guns at his hips. She noticed them. He noticed her noticing. "I'm not going to cause you any trouble, ma'am," he said, low voice, controlled. "My horse has a stone bruise that needs a day of rest. I can pay for the use of your barn. I'll be gone tomorrow morning." "How bad is the wound?" she asked. "I've had worse." "That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a second, the kind of quiet of someone deciding how much to say. "Bad enough that I'd rather not find out what happens if I keep riding tonight." Clara looked at him, at the horse, at the stain spreading slowly along his left side. "There's a water pump by the barn," she said. "Get your horse settled, then come to the back door." "I don't need to come inside. You need that wound cleaned and closed, or you'll be dead by Thursday." She said it the way she said everything, flat, practical, no room for argument. "Come to the back door." She turned and went inside before he could respond. His name, she learned 20 minutes later while cleaning a bullet graze along his left ribs, was Ethan Cade. He told her this sitting at her kitchen table with his shirt off, very still in the way of a man who has learned that stillness during pain is a skill worth developing. She worked with carbolic solution and the medical handbook Daniel had ordered from back east, the one she'd never expected to use. The wound was a deep graze, the kind that tears muscle on its way through. Serious. Not fatal if treated right.
"Who shot you?" she asked.
"Men I used to work for," he said. She waited for more. It didn't come. Not that night. She cleaned. She sutured. She tied the bandage and told him not to use the left arm for anything strenuous. "I'll sleep in the barn," he said. "The barn is clean and the hay is dry," she said. "Breakfast is at 6. She moved to the stove with her back to him so he wouldn't see her hands, which were shaking. Not from fear, she realized, but from the effort of being near another person after 11 months of no one. She heard him stand, heard him pull on his shirt. "Ma'am?" She didn't turn around. "Thank you," he said. She nodded at the stove. She listened to him walk out, and then she stood very still in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the silence settle back around her like something that had been waiting for him to leave. That night, Clara checked the locks on the doors. Not because she was afraid of him, because she had found something tucked into the saddlebag he'd left by the barn door while she was settling his horse. A folded piece of paper she hadn't meant to see. A wanted notice. Not for Ethan Cade. For a man named Harlan Cross. And written across the bottom, in handwriting that matched the careful script on the saddlebag's tag, "Evidence delivered to Marshal's office, Springer, October 3rd. She put the paper back exactly where she'd found it. She didn't ask him about it. Not yet. He was awake before she was. She came out to the porch in the early gray light with 2 cups of coffee. She'd made 2 without thinking, the way she always used to, and found him already at the north fence line, moving along it with the careful attention of a man taking inventory. She set 1 cup on the porch rail and drank the other. He came back an hour later, when the sky had gone from gray to the particular pale gold of early October mornings in the valley. He moved cautiously, favoring his left side, but he moved. She handed him the 2nd cup without comment. He took it, looked at it, then looked at her. "I walked the whole line," he said. 22 posts need resetting. Wire in 3 sections needs replacing. I can do it today if you tell me where your supplies are." "You have a wound that needs 2 more days," she said. "I can work a fence line with a wrapped side," he said. It wasn't an argument, just a fact. She told him where the wire and tools were. She was weeding the kitchen garden an hour later when she heard him stop. She looked up without meaning to. He was standing at the corner of the barn, back to her, cleaning one of the guns. Not tensely, the routine motion of habit, something done every morning the way another man might sharpen a knife before breakfast. Automatic. He hadn't been thinking about whether she'd see him. He turned and found her watching. A silence. He looked at the gun in his hand, then back at her. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just met her eyes and waited. She went back to her weeding. That evening, supper was quieter than the night before. Not cold, just careful. 2 people recalibrating the distance between them. It was Ethan who finally spoke. "My father ran irrigation on a farm in Tennessee before the war," he said. "I grew up digging channels. I looked at yours today. The East Bend is backing up because silt has raised the floor. You need a headgate 20 feet upstream." Clara looked at him across the table. "Daniel spent 3 summers trying to fix that channel," she said quietly. "He was fighting the symptom," Ethan said. He caught himself. "I'm sorry, that came out wrong." "No," Clara said. "It came out true." Outside, the New Mexico sky had filled up with stars, the way it did on cold, clear nights. so many that it looked like something spilled, like something too large to have been meant. Clara had stopped seeing that sky somewhere in the months of grief. She looked at it now through the window and felt, for the first time in a long time, that the world was larger than the walls of the kitchen. "Tell me about Tennessee," she said. He told her. And later, when she went to bed, she lay for a long time listening to the night. Somewhere past midnight, she heard it. Movement outside. Deliberate. Quiet. She went to the window. Ethan was standing at the barn door, looking south down the valley road. Just standing, watching the dark. She went back to bed, but she didn't sleep for a long time. Something was coming. He already knew it. The second day, they fixed the water channel together. She'd asked to help, and he'd accepted without making a production of it, which she appreciated. They worked in the easy rhythm that develops between people who are both competent and paying attention. She'd experienced it once before with Daniel, and had not expected to feel it again so soon with someone so different. He showed her how to read the water's direction from the shape of the banks. "Water always finds the lowest point," he said, tamping down the headgate frame they'd built from barn lumber. "That's not a problem. That's information. You either work with it or you spend 10 times the effort trying to stop it." By afternoon, the channel was running clean through the new headgate. Simple, obvious in the way that good solutions always are in retrospect. They sat on the bank in the late light with muddy boots and tired arms, and Ethan looked at the water with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has fixed a thing properly. "How did you end up in the territory?" Clara asked. "From Tennessee. War ended, farm was gone. Went west with nothing and found work." He turned a flat stone in his hand. "The kind of work that was available to someone with no land and no family, and a willingness to be useful with a gun." "Do you regret it?" He was quiet for a moment. "I regret some of what I did," he said. "Not in a way I can undo, just in a way I carry." He set the stone down. "The man I last worked for, Harlan Cross, he ran cattle operations across 3 territories. Some of it was legal, the rest..." He paused. "When I finally understood the full shape of what I was part of, I tried to leave. He doesn't let people leave easy." It was the most he'd said. Clara had been patient, and patience had paid off, not because she'd pressed, but because she'd waited long enough for him to get there himself. "Why did you stay as long as you did?" she asked. "Because I told myself the part I was doing was straight," he said. "That's how it works. You do your part and you don't look too hard at the rest." She understood that. She had her own version of it, smaller, domestic, less violent, but the same mechanism. Looking at the thing in front of you, and not too hard at what it cost. "My father used to say that the land doesn't care how you feel about it," she said. "Only what you do. Every day, what you do." He looked at her. "I'm starting to think earning works the same way," he said slowly. "Not something you finish, something you keep doing. And at some point, you do it in one place." The water ran through the channel they'd built together. Clara stood up and brushed the dirt from her hands. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, without looking at her yet. "About Harlan. If he sends men here, tell me at supper," she said, "when we're inside." He nodded. They walked back to the house in the long evening light. He never finished telling her. Because supper had barely started when they heard the horses on the road. 4 riders. Clara saw them through the window before Ethan did, coming down the valley road with the unhurried certainty of men who have been given a destination and the authority to reach it. Ethan was already on his feet. "Get the shotgun," he said. "Kitchen window. You'll have a line on all 4 of them." I know what I'll have, she said, already moving. He walked out into the yard. The 4 riders pulled up 30 feet from him. The man in front was thick-necked and red-faced, with the flat confidence of someone who has never needed other qualities. Behind him, 3 men with their hands resting loose near their guns. "Cade," the thick-necked man said. "Briggs?" Ethan's voice was level. "Harlan sent 4 of you. I'm touched. Harlan wants you back. That's not going to happen." Briggs looked at the house, at the barn, at the land around them. "This your place now? Got yourself settled?" "I'm a guest," Ethan said. "Which means you're on someone else's land, and you weren't invited." "Harlan doesn't care. I do." Clara's voice from the kitchen window, flat and clear and carrying everything necessary. Briggs turned. She was there, with the shotgun at her shoulder, and she was looking down the barrel with the calm of a woman who has defended this land before and will again. "This is private property," she said. "You are trespassing. First barrel is buckshot. Second is a slug. I will not miss." Then Briggs did something Ethan hadn't expected. He dismounted. 2 slow steps forward, testing. "Briggs." Ethan said the name once, quiet. Briggs stopped, looked at him. Then, a smile. The kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Harlan's gonna want to know where you landed," he said. "Seems like you found something worth staying for." His eyes went to the house, to Clara at the window. Then he mounted up. "This isn't finished, Cade." "It is on this property," Ethan said. The 4 riders went back down the valley road. Ethan stood in the yard until the dust settled. Then he turned. Clara was already at the door. They looked at each other across 10 feet of morning air. Ethan's face was not the face of a man who had just won something. It was the face of a man who had just understood that the trouble he carried had found a new address. "He'll be back," he said. "Not those men. But Harlan won't leave this alone now that he knows where I am." "Then we deal with that when it comes," Clara said. "Clara, this is my problem. I don't want it becoming yours." She looked at him for a long moment. "Ethan," she said, "walk inside and eat something. Then tell me everything about Harlan Cross that I need to know." He opened his mouth. "That," she said, "was not a discussion." He walked inside. His horse was sound. Ethan checked the hoof in the early light, pressing along the sole, watching the gelding's response, running his thumb along the white line of the wall. The bruising had resolved, weight even on all 4, ready to travel. He stood in the barn for a long moment with the bridle in his hands. Then he went to the house. Clara was at the stove. She heard him come in and didn't turn around. The particular stillness of someone who has heard a thing coming and has been deciding how to receive it. "He's sound," Ethan said. "I know," she said. A silence that had weight in it. "Clara." She turned. He was standing in the kitchen doorway with his hat in his hands, looking at her with nothing managed, nothing guarded, just the man underdog, all of it. "I'm not going to say something foolish," he said. 3 days is 3 days. I know that." He turned his hat slowly. "But I would like to ask if I could write to you, from Colorado." "And if I wrote back?" she said. "What would that mean to you?" "It would mean I had a reason to get there faster," he said, "and a reason to stay when I did." She was quiet for a long time, long enough that the coffee began to make its sounds. "My father used to say the land doesn't care how you feel about it," she said. "Only what you do. Every day, what you do." She paused. "I think people might work the same way." "I think you're right," he said. "Write to me from Colorado," she said. "And when you've been there long enough to know whether you mean to stay," she met his eyes. Come back and tell me in person." He nodded, put on his hat, turned to go. "Ethan," he stopped. "Eat breakfast first," she said. "Colorado will still be there in an hour." The corner of his mouth moved. Then he smiled, full, unguarded, the kind that changes a face. Clara turned back to the stove before she could smile back. But she did. When he rode out an hour later, Clara went back inside and stood in the kitchen. The second cup was still on the table. She looked at it for a long time. Then she walked to the bedroom, the room that was still too large, still too quiet, and opened the window. She could see the valley road from there. She watched until the dust settled. Then she went to make coffee. She only made 1 cup this time. It was a start. The letter from Trinidad arrived on a Thursday in October. Clara was in the garden when the mail rider came down the road. She didn't run, but she reached the gate before he'd finished tying his horse, and she was aware, distantly with some amusement at herself, that she'd walked very fast to get there. 3 pages, in the careful handwriting of a man who'd taught himself to read and write in his 20s. She read it at the kitchen table with both hands around a cup of coffee. He wrote about the town, the ranch, the mountains, a horse he'd seen that reminded him of hers. He asked whether the water channel was holding through the fall rains. Then, in the final paragraph, in slightly darker ink, as though he'd set the letter down and come back to it. I find myself thinking about the Cimarron Valley more than makes sense for a man with work to do. The view here is different. Bigger mountains, louder water. But I keep looking south. She read that sentence 4 times. Then she folded the letter and put it in the drawer of Daniel's old desk, the only place in the house that seemed right for something that mattered, and wrote back the same evening. She wrote about the channel, which was working exactly as designed, the fence, which had held through a hard October wind, the cattle. And then, not in one place, but woven through all of it, the fact that the evenings were very quiet, and that on one occasion she had set 2 cups out for supper before she caught herself, and that she'd chosen to see it as proof that some habits are hopeful rather than sad. She sealed it before she could revise it. In November, he wrote 1 page. She wrote back 2. In December, a letter arrived that was shorter than the others. Garrett offered me the permanent position and a parcel of land. I told him I needed to think about it. I have been thinking about it in the direction of no. I will explain in person. Expect me in the Cimarron Valley on or around the 15th. There is also something I should have told you sooner. I heard from a man who rides through Raton Pass regularly. Harlan Cross was killed in November. A confrontation with a federal marshal near the pass. I have been sitting with this news for 2 weeks, and I do not know exactly what to feel about it, except that whatever was following me is not following me anymore. I thought you should know. Clara read the letter standing at the window. She looked at the valley for a long time. Then she put the letter in the drawer with the others. She did not write back to tell him the 15th was inconvenient. He arrived on the 14th. He looked different, settled, less of the road in him. His horse was in good weight, and his coat was new, and he sat straighter in the saddle. A man who had been somewhere real long enough to begin the work of becoming someone. He pulled up at the gate. He took off his hat. Clara walked out across the yard and opened the gate. "You're a day early," she said. "I know," he said. "Is that all right?" She looked up at him. "There's coffee," she said. "Come inside and tell me about this Garrett and his parcel of land." "I turned it down," he said. "I know," she said. "I'd like to hear it anyway." He climbed down, tied his horse, walked through the gate she was still holding open. "I have something to tell you," he said, "in person, like I promised." "I know that too," she said. "Come inside. The coffee's going cold." She let the gate swing shut behind them. The valley stretched out in the clean December light, mountains holding their snow, the Cimarron running low and clear, the north fence standing straight against the cold blue sky. The water channel ran exactly as it should. Everything else would have to be figured out one day at a time. They were both, it turned out, good at that. They were married in March, when the valley was beginning to green. The circuit preacher delivered a different sermon for once, witnessed by 3 neighboring families who had heard, through the quiet telegraph of isolated communities, that something worth witnessing was happening at the Whitfield place. Clara kept the name Whitfield on the ranch because that was what the land knew. Daniel had earned his place in the ground behind the oak tree, and that didn't change. Ethan understood without being told, which was one of the reasons she'd said yes. He turned out to be everything 3 days had suggested, and more. He was thorough and steady, honest about what he knew and what he didn't, quick to learn the latter, and patient in teaching the former. The water system improved 3 more times in the first 2 years, each change building on the last, until the Whitfield Ranch became the best irrigated operation in the valley, and neighboring ranchers started arriving with questions. He never carried the guns past the first year. One morning, Clara came to the barn and found them on the shelf above the tack rack, clean, oiled, where they would stay. She didn't say anything. He didn't explain. Some decisions don't need explaining to the right person. On their first anniversary, he took her to the oak tree at sunset and stood beside her without speaking, his hand finding hers while the light left the mountain. She had thought, in the months after Daniel died, that the capacity for this, for standing next to someone in the evening light and feeling that the world was exactly the right size, was something that happened once. She had been wrong. The territory has a way of teaching you things when you're ready to learn them. Some lessons arrive dusty and unannounced, with a bullet graze and a limping horse. They are worth every hard mile. And here it is, the complete story. From a wounded gunman at a widow's gate to a December morning when someone opened that gate and never closed it again. A story about water channels, fences, and the silent work of building trust with someone and with yourself. Before you go, one thing. Leave your country in the comments, that's all. I want to see where this story traveled tonight. It means more than you can imagine. And if you listen to the end, thank you. Truly. You didn't have to stay, but you did. That's why we keep creating these stories.